Today we're going to be talking about our Savior in the storm. We're in Mark 6, and yes, it seems like, man, been mentioning storms a lot. Mark does that. Mark did that intentionally. We are repeating something for a particular reason. So, our Savior in the storm. Last week, what we saw was, we saw the miraculous feeding of the 5,000. It was a powerful demonstration of Jesus' love and his power. And as soon as that gets done, as soon as he feeds 5,000, they wrap up this ministry opportunity, because remember, he didn't just show up in the middle of a field and said, you know what would be good today, just to feed everybody. He was ministering to them. He said, these sheep need a shepherd, and so he's teaching them. And as soon as that ministry opportunity is over, we pick up in Mark 6 with Jesus being present in the current storm. In Mark 6, 45, 48, and we're just going to read the first part of 48a, it says immediately, and I'm going to pick that back up in a minute, okay? Just let me put a thumbtack in this immediately. Immediately, he made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, to Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowd. And after he had taken leave of them, he went up on the mountain to pray. And when evening came, the boat was out on the sea, and he was alone on land, and he saw that they were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them. So it says that he made them. He compelled them to go. As soon as it was done, he said, you go. You go in the boat. I'm going to take some time for myself. I'm going to go up here and pray. Now, that suggests that maybe there was a little bit of tension there, like, well, no, we'll stay with you, or you come with us, or whatever. But it says he made them go. They go out, they get on the Sea of Galilee, and what happens? Another storm pops up. Now, there's nothing in this particular text that suggests, like the first storm, that they felt that their life was threatened. But what we do see in this storm is that it is a rough storm, and that they're having a hard time working against the waves and working against the wind, and that they're struggling. This imagery can even resonate in our own lives, right? How often do we find ourselves in situations that even with our best efforts, it seems like there's very little fruit, right? These are, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, these are fishermen. They're really good in boats. They really know what they're doing out on the Sea of Galilee. This is their home. They know what they're doing, but they're struggling. They're struggling. Their best efforts, they're barely making any headway. And unlike the first storm, where they were in the storm and they were worried to death that they were going to lose their lives and Jesus is asleep, unlike that storm, when they look in the boat, they're painfully aware that Jesus is not there. There's no sleeping Jesus to go wake up or anything like that. They probably feel like they're doing this alone. They don't see Jesus. Now, we're going to emphasize that a little bit more as we go into this passage, but they don't see Jesus, even though they should be aware that he's always there. Psalms 139, 7 through 10 says, "Where shall I go from your spirit? Or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings in the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me." He's everywhere. God is everywhere. And they should know that. But they don't. They're out there, they're struggling against the wind. They've already seen the miraculous. They've seen so many miracles. But in a storm, particularly, they've seen Jesus quiet a storm. They've seen him wake up and just quiet a storm that they thought was going to take their life. They know what his power is. But because they don't see him, they're struggling. So pick up and let's look at Jesus' power. In Mark 6, continuing that verse in 48 and 49, it says, "And about the fourth watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea. He meant to pass by them. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost, and they cried out." It says that about the fourth watch. So I'm going to go back to that, what I told you I'm going to put a thumbtack in. It's just a very small point. But immediately it says that as soon as they were done with the feeding of the 5,000, that he sent them out. The fourth watch is 3 a.m. in the morning. That's the fourth part of the night. 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. is the particular time. Can you imagine how exhausted they had to have been from all the ministry that they'd done that day, including passing out food, taking up the food, all the things. And when it's finally done, they take out on the boat, and here they are at like 3 a.m. to 6 a.m., somewhere in that window, and they're battling against this storm. Just mentally, physically tired. And in this case, Jesus has sent them away, and they look in the boat, and he's not there. And as they're struggling, they look out on the water, 3 a.m., mind you. I'm just going to keep saying 3 a.m. It could have been 4, it could have been 5, it could have been 6. But at 3 a.m., mind you, they look out on the dark, and they see somebody walking on the water. It'll startle you. My house, Halloween decorations and everything, I don't know, I'm a little obsessed with 80s pop culture, and so I put up a little Michael Myers statue right at my door. I put it up. I'm going to stress, I put it up. I went to look out my window yesterday to see if the mailman had ran, and I screamed. Like a little, it was just a little, because it startled me when I wasn't expecting. I put it up, but it startled me by looking out because it's right there, like right out the window of the door and everything. Can you imagine? Yes, I'm sure they were very startled when at 3 in the morning, being exhausted as they were, fighting this, feeling like they're in a losing battle, maybe even in their feelings a little bit about Jesus sending them away to start with. As they're doing all this, they see Jesus walking on the water. It doesn't compute. It doesn't compute. They've never seen anybody walking on the water. Yeah, I bet they were startled. But what we see in this moment of Jesus walking on the water is yet another example out of all the examples that they had in their life of his power, of his authority over everything, over nature, over the rules of nature. In Colossians 1, 16 through 17, it says, "For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together." They have seen him in the past control nature. They have examples from the Old Testament of how God has controlled nature. But yet in their struggles, they are fighting that wind. They're fighting that wind. Third point. Jesus brings peace to our hearts. In Mark 6, 50 through 52, it says, "For they had all saw him and were terrified. But immediately he spoke to them and said, 'Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid.' And he got into the boat with them. And the wind ceased, and they were utterly astounded, for they did not understand about the loaves, but their hearts were hardened." I connect the two. I don't know how close it was in watching and everything, but there was an old movie when I was a kid called The Never-Ending Story. And The Never-Ending Story, they had this giant dog on there. And it was nothing terrifying about the dog. But I lived in the country, and so my dad would send me outside to do chores, and I remember one night I had to go out to the pump house, which is a couple of 100 yards away from the house, and there's no lights on it. So I had to go out there because there's a breaker that would flip out there I don't know why as a kid it was my responsibility, but he sent me out there. And I went out there and I was struggling, but I got it and I'm headed back to the house. And I can remember it as clear as day because when I was coming back, I saw something, I heard something, and in the shadows, it was that dog. And he was big. And I was not going to go to my house. I thought, man, I'm about to take off. I'm about to run. I'm going to go out into the field and everything. And I remember just being terrified. And then the sound kept getting closer and closer, and it was my dad. He said, Danny. And as soon as I heard his voice, as soon as I heard my name, he didn't have to tell me anymore. He didn't have to be, what are you doing? Or I don't remember whatever. I just remember that as soon as I heard his voice, that everything that was in my imagination, everything that was scary in that moment just dissipated. Because it was my dad. You know? And there wasn't nothing in the dark that was bigger than my dad. Like, it wasn't, you know, nothing else could handle that and everything. And for the disciples, I think it's the exact same thing. They know how powerful Jesus is. They just didn't see him there. And so when they heard his voice, even though everything didn't compute around them, as startled as they were, when they heard his voice, they were comforted by it. And in his presence, they knew that everything was going to be okay. In this passage, it says, take heart, it is I. But before it says that, I want to pick up at the very end. Because it's something that at the very end, that if we just glance at it, it might not even stick out to us. But at the very end of this passage, in the story about walking on water, it says, for they did not, we were right. For they did not understand about the loaves, but their hearts were hardened. This expression right here, their hearts were hardened, it only pops up 15 times in all the Bible. And it's 11 or 12, don't hold me to this, but it's 11, 12 of them where it says God's the one that hardens hearts, like it did with the Pharisees, with the Pharaoh in Moses' time. God's the one that hardens heart. But here it's not saying that God hardened their hearts, it's saying that their hearts were hardened. Now this expression of a hardened heart, what does it mean? It means a refusal. It's a refusal to listen to God. It's a refusal to accept something from God. And in the Pharaoh's case, right, like when Moses and them wanted to flee out of Egypt, he refused to let them go, even though miracle after miracle was being done. His heart was hardened. He just refused. He was stubborn. He sank his feet into the sand. He was like, no, I'm not going to do it. Doesn't matter what you say. Doesn't matter what you do. Doesn't matter what your Lord brings down. I'm not going to do it. Well, in the disciples' case, it's not like I refuse to accept God, but they refuse to accept who he was. We even see it if we skip to the end, where they still not understanding that he's the Messiah, but they refuse at this point to accept on faith who he is and what he's doing. They're still trying to put him in their box. They're still trying to make him into who they want him to be instead of accepting him for who he is. And so here it says they did not understand about the loaves. They didn't understand that miracle. They didn't understand the miracle of walking on water. Their hearts are hardened because they're not fully accepting on faith exactly who he is. It won't be till we go to a little bit further until Peter even acknowledges, because Jesus will say, hey, who do you say I am? And they won't even reply right off the way that he's asking them to. They'll be like, well, some people say that you're Elijah. Some people say you're a prophet. Who do you say I am? And finally Peter says, you are the Son of God. And Jesus replies to him, that did not come to you through your own understanding, but through God himself, through the Father. And based upon your proclamation, I will build my church. But at this point, they don't understand. And they keep trying to compute it. They keep trying to put him in a box. They keep trying to understand him as they understand him. And so there's two things that I really want to point out here that I think we really can take from this. But to continue on, sometimes it's easier for me, like if I pace or if I'm doing something, to articulate things. Is it okay with you if I'm doing something while I try to articulate something? I didn't bother seeing if you replied or not. But these two things is that, one, they don't see Jesus. We pointed that out, right? They don't see Jesus. They look around, the storm's come up, and the wind's blowing, and they're struggling with the boat. And they don't see Jesus. Second thing is that when they're out there, they don't understand the power of Jesus. All right? It's been a long time since I've done this. I used to do this every Sunday. Don't mind me. They don't understand the power of Jesus. They don't understand who he is, what he can do, and they don't see him at all. So, here they are. They're in the boat. They're scared to death. Now, how does this relate to us? This relates to us by the fact that we spend a lot of time in our life not seeing Jesus in our life, and by not understanding his power in our life. And I wanted to put this up right here to kind of demonstrate it, but really honestly, if we're going to be honest, I didn't like the way Tyndall was looking at me earlier. And so when he gets back up here, I won't have to look at him. No. So, how does this apply to us? Well, this is one of the ways. This is not the only way, but one of the ways that we stop seeing God in our life is we start putting up our own blinds, our own curtains. We do it for selfish reasons. I'm not saying this is the end all be all, that this is the only answer, but it's true. We do, and we're living good lives, and we're doing good things. Maybe we're back active in church. Maybe we've been active in church. We're back to reading the Bible plan. We sit there and we're like, oh man, I can't wait to read through this, and we're praying and we're doing all these things. But then a movie comes out. And I'm doing so many good things in my life, but there's this movie that's coming out, and it's got a little bit of trash in it, but it really speaks to me, you know, because I really like this genre. I really like the actors that are in this movie and stuff like that. For 2 hours, I'm going to go and watch this movie, and in the way we act, in the way that we think through this, we think that we're going to, for 2 hours, we're going to put God over here. We're going to pull the blinds, and for 2 hours we're just going to do whatever we want to do. Now, go back to Psalms. God's everywhere. God's not blocked off from our life, but he's blocked off from our vision because we have partitioned off a moment in our life. And we do moment after moment after moment like that, because sometimes that woman that we work with at reception, she has worn our last nerves, and today I'm going to give it to her, okay? But I ain't going to bring God into this, because that's not a good witness and everything. I'm going to put up another little partition just for 15 minutes, just to give her peace of my mind. It's not something I would be proud for God to see, so I'm going to put this little partition up. He's there, but I choose to put this up so that I can't see him. Is this making sense? And in my life, I do this over and over and over until it becomes like a pattern. It becomes a behavior. It becomes a habit of where I think in my mind that I am putting on my Christian suit and I'm taking off my Christian suit. And the majority of the time, as long as 90%, 95%, 99% of the time I'm wearing my Christian suit, that's better than nothing. That's awesome. And so for 1%, 5% of the time, I'm petitioning God off in my life, and I'm getting used to what I'm doing is conditioning my life so that I don't see God in all areas of my life. I don't see him in all areas of my life because I got these blinds up. I might know he's there, or I might not know he's there. When Tyndall comes up, I'll know he's there, right? I'll hear his voice, but I don't have to see his smart little looks at me. You know, I don't have to. I got this up. I don't have to pay attention to him. With God, it's the same way. I can go, I feel like I can go and do what I want. I can watch what I want. I can listen to what I want. I can talk the way I want, as long as I'm on this side of this. No, you're dragging God in there with you. God is everywhere. The disciples are sitting there in that storm, and they're not doing anything evil, they're not sinning, they're not doing anything, but they have a wrong view of who God is. Even though they have that verse from Psalms, even though they understand that He's everywhere, and they've seen Him do everything that they need Him to do, they have a wrong view of Him. And so when He's not in that boat, because that's the only place they're looking for Him, then they feel helpless, alone, abandoned. And I'm going to tell you, what we learn from that is that when we're facing storms, that when we look out there, sometimes we don't see God. It's because we got these up. And we conditioned ourselves not to see Him in all areas of our life. We've gotten to the point of where we're the ones that do it, but we're like, where are you? Got blinders on. He's there. Second thing that we see here with the disciples is, this is not what they expected. They have other precedents. They have the precedent of Jesus being in the boat, Him sitting in the stern, asleep, and then He gets up and He speaks after they go and get Him. They go over there and they shake Him and they're like, don't you care? We're all about to die. And Jesus gets up and He's like, it's going to be fine. And He calms the storm down. They got that precedent. They even have the Old Testament precedent of where Moses wanted to cross a big sea. So God, they know, because there's already been this precedent, that God can sit there and go, you know what? Water depart. And walk across on dry land. They know He can do that. But what the last thing they're expecting is that He's just going to... Well, you know what? Another one. They know from Christ's temptation that Satan took Him up on high and said that if you cast yourself down, then angels will catch you and fly you across. So even that they would be okay with if they saw Jesus just being carried across by angels. They have a precedent for that. They heard this story. It's recorded by them. What they don't have, what they have no expectation for, is that Jesus is just like, I don't want to waste my time with anything. I'm just going to walk on it. I'm just going to walk on water. They weren't expecting it. So for them, they have Him all boxed up. They know who He's supposed to be and how He's supposed to operate, and when He didn't fit inside their box, they just could not compute it. Perhaps, maybe, at times, we get guilty of the same thing. We box Jesus up and we expect Him to work in a certain manner, to be where we want Him to be, to handle this in the way that we want to. When we should accept that, no matter what we're going through, that He's there, and that He loves us, and that He wants to work in those circumstances. Philippians 4:6-7 says, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. He says, don't be anxious about anything, but bring everything to Him in prayer. Have you taken a moment in your storms, in your obstacles, in your situation, or maybe even in your mountaintop that's going on right now, and just offered it over to God? Offered your glory over to God. Offer your anxiety over to God. He's in it all together with you. And the last thing that we're going to point out today is that Jesus desires for us to come to Him. Mark 6:53-56 says, when they had crossed over, they came to the land at Gennesaret and moored to the shore. And when they got out of the boat, the people immediately recognized Him and ran about the whole region and began to bring the sick people on their beds to wherever they heard He was. And wherever He came, in villages, cities, or countrysides, they laid the sick in the marketplace and implored Him that they might touch even the fringe of His garments, and as many as touched it were made well. This is pretty much attached to the other. It's all in one setting, because when they come to the other side, after calming their fears, Jesus climbed into the boat. The wind ceased. He told them, don't fear. And they get to the other side, and as soon as people start recognizing exactly what he desires happens, they seek him out. They come to him. And they come to him based off of faith. It takes a huge amount of faith, and that's why it's written in God's Word for people to seek him out and be okay with just seeking to touch the fringe of his garment and expecting that to work. They're thinking outside the box. They haven't placed him in a box. They're seeking him out. And that's what Jesus desires, is for us, for everyone, to invite him in. In Revelations 3:20 it says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and eat with him, and he with me. As Tyndall comes up this morning, and I won't know when he does, but as Tyndall comes up this morning, have you invited him in? Start there. Have you invited him into your life? Now go further. Have you invited him into all areas of your life? Let us stand this morning.